Hey everybody, welcome to the Work with Purpose podcast. This month we're talking all about grit and perseverance and why you'll need both of those to get where you want to go in your career. So stick around, that episode is up next. Hey everybody, welcome to our show. I'm Randy Mahoney Jr. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Work with Purpose podcast. So if you're new to our show, we launch new episodes on the first Friday of each month during our seasons. We also will send out what are called podcast update or pod update episodes, and those will tell you about if we're going on to a break or something like that. And also, as you listen, I would invite you to subscribe wherever you're joining us, whether it's on YouTube or whether you're listening on your favorite podcast channel. And also consider leaving a rating or a review in Apple Podcasts or iTunes for our show. When you leave a rating or a review, that helps new people learn about our show. Thank you in advance for doing that. That helps us. And you can be sure to subscribe as well on your podcast platform of choice or wherever you're listening to us so that you can stay in the know and not miss new episodes. So one other thing before we get into our show for this month, be sure to find us on linktree.com so that you can get our most important links for our podcast, such as we have easy ways for you to get to our website, to leave a podcast review that I just talked about. You can see our career tutorial that we just launched for 2021 and so much more. So you can find us on Linktree at linktr.ee/WWPcast. I'll repeat that one more time. That's linktr.ee/WWPcast. All right, so now that we have that out of the way, let's get to our episode for this month, and let's talk about perseverance and grit for your career. All right, so this month, as we start to talk about grit and perseverance for your career journey, here's how I want to break it down for you, and that's kind of in three main parts. First, I want to give you our big idea. Second, I want to give you a really great story that I think will help drive the point home about perseverance and grit in your career. And then third, I want to bring you to just some well-known research specifically on grit and perseverance. Okay, so first up, the big idea for this month's episode. Now, again, if you're new to our podcast, I try to do this every episode, give you a big idea. It's a 1 or 2 sentence takeaway that, if you remember nothing else from this episode, that it can kind of be a good summary statement for the episode in a nutshell. So for this month's episode, talking about grit, talking about perseverance, here's our big idea. To have a successful career journey, you'll need to embrace perseverance and grit. I'll repeat that for you again. To have a successful career journey, you'll need to embrace perseverance and grit. All right, so now that we've talked about our big idea for this month's episode, I want to bring you to the second part in talking about perseverance and grit. And I want to share with you a story about a comic book artist named Todd McFarlane. So if you don't know who he is, I haven't heard that name before, I'll give you some context. So Todd McFarlane, he's the creator of the comic book character Spawn. He's created McFarlane Toy Companies, been drawing comics and comic books for quite some time, since the 90s and even, back into the 80s. So I was watching this story from the folks at the Sci-Fi Network. I'll put a link to this video segment of his documentary in the application guide for this episode, so you can definitely find the link for that. You don't want to miss that. So Todd McFarlane, he created Spawn, comic book character, and things like that. He a little bit about his story growing up before he got rich and famous. McFarlane, he went to college in Washington. He did classes. He played baseball, and after his classes and things were done, he also talked about kind of his struggles from his life as a college student, newly married. He also had a 3-hour janitor job in the evening, and then he would come home to the trailer where he lived. He did his class homework, and then he worked on putting a sample comic together. In the video, it talked about that he worked until the wee hours of the morning, so after midnight until 5, or even later in that. And during that time, it was kind of a crucible time for McFarlane, and that he took all of his comic book art From those nights of him drawing pages and things like that, he sent his art out to pretty much any comic book publishing company that would put its hands on it. So Marvel, DC, but when I say every comic book company, he mentioned like 5, 10, 15 other names that I'd never heard of before. So a lot of perseverance in that. And from that process, McFarlane also said he did this over years and years and years worth of time. From that process, he got tons of no's, tons of rejection. But eventually, McFarlane got a call from a guy named Steve Englehart, and that really started to put his comic art career and help him take off. And now, if you know anything about him, he's rich and famous today and drawing lots of art and has a lot of just great success. So a couple of takeaways from Todd McFarlane's story. Number one, kind of this theme that we're talking about this month, it's that value of perseverance, that value of grit, just sticking with it, even when things are hard. And, even from his story that I kind of walked you through just a minute ago, from his time in college, when no one knew his name, when no one really took him seriously as a comic artist, from that time of obscurity, Todd McFarlane, he kept at it. He kept honing his craft. He kept persisting. He kept, trying to reach out and connect with other people who could help bring him to a career opportunity in the comic book world. And he kept at it for a long time through a lot of no's and a lot of rejection. And he stayed the course. And I think that can be a takeaway for us and for you as you think about your own career journey and where you are right now. So again, that story for Todd McFarlane, it comes from folks at the Sci-Fi Network in a short documentary that they did. And I'll put a link to that in our application guide for this episode, so you can get our show notes and things like that. So far this month, and we've talked about perseverance and grit. I've brought you through our big idea. I've talked you through a story, and now I want to bring you some research on perseverance and grit. Okay, so as we start to kind of turn the corner and start to talk about research into perseverance and grit, I want to bring this to you, and it comes from a researcher and professor named Angela Duckworth. You might have heard that name before, but she's most famously known for her research into grit and this idea of perseverance when it comes to the field of education. So think of K through 12 education, kind of elementary all the way up to the high school setting and even beyond that too. So she's a professor from the University of Pennsylvania, and I'm bringing you just some snippets and some highlights from an article that she did along with other researchers at the University of Pennsylvania back in 2007. And all credit goes to her. And I'll make sure that I put a final link to that article if you want to read it for yourself. It's very interesting. But for this term grit and perseverance, I want to kind of bring you to a quote that she shared from her article. And she says this. She says that we define grit as perseverance and passion for long-term goals. Grit entails working strenuously toward challenges, maintaining effort and interest over years despite failure, adversity, and plateaus and progress. And she goes on to say, the gritty individual approaches achievement as a marathon. His advantage is stamina, whereas disappointment or boredom signals to others that it's time to change trajectory and cut losses. The gritty individual stays the course. Man, that's such a great quote. And again, I'll put that in our application guide because that's kind of lengthy too. But I want you to really focus on that idea. The gritty individual stays the course. So that's kind of a working definition that we have for grit. It's perseverance. It's sticking with things. It's passion for your long-term goals. It's having a 30,000-foot view, as I know I've talked about on previous episodes before, thinking about your career. They see achievement as a marathon that Duckworth talks about, and they kind of value stamina and things like that. So one other kind of bit of research too that Duckworth mentions that I thought was really interesting. In her article, she also cites research from previous scholars and researchers dating back into the 1900s and earlier. And they cite that successful people in business, judges, and even other industries, they really showed this same idea of perseverance and grit, that they really had that tenacity, had the ability to stick with things when things got tough, and they kind of centered around the idea that someone's ability alone is not enough. So your sheer willpower is not enough. Your sheer skills or ability is not enough. So I thought that was really interesting too. So aside from defining grit, a couple other things that I want to weave to you, just again, some highlights. Angela Duckworth and her other researchers, they did 6 different studies, trying to test for grit, test for perseverance in different age ranges and generations. And they found 3 common things I just want to put in front of you here when it comes to grit. So gritty people, according to Duckworth and her researchers, was number 1. They saw that it was more common in older people, and they kind of took that to likely indicate that as someone gets older, their kind of grittiness muscle is kind of gets stronger over time, more grit over time. Number 2, they also said that grittier people, from their studies, seem to have less career changes. And then third, grittier people tended to have or pursue higher levels of education. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And then really quickly, Duckworth and her researchers also gave kind of 2 pieces of advice that I just want to share with you, kind of targeted to students in the K through 12 setting, but I think we can have some takeaways for ourselves as well as we think about our lives and think about our careers. And the first one is Duckworth encouraged students to really work with intensity. So work kind of with full strength, but also with stamina over the long haul, and then also be ready for moments of failure. So I think we can take a lot from that, is that as you think about your career journey, think about how are you working with intensity, or are you phoning it in? Are you bringing your best energy to your work, or are you really kind of holding back for some reason? And then another good question with that first idea of being prepared for moments of failure is that as you think about where you are in your career journey, how would you say you respond to failure? Do you kind of shrink back when you make a mistake, or do you think about the idea of, in the moment of a setback, do you think about, well, what does this make possible? What opportunity can come from that? Then the second and last piece of advice that Duckworth shares for students, but I think there's also some good takeaways for you and for me. She encouraged students to really focus in on the point that success is something that takes years and years of time to develop, and that it takes investment to meet. So for you and for me, as you think about your career journey, I would encourage you to really think about, what is your idea of success? Do you see it as kind of a microwave approach, like put time in and it's done quickly? Or do you take more of the crock pot approach, where you see it, I'm going to let the flavors develop over time. I'm going to let it go low and slow, as some people like to say in the cooking world. I think as you think about your idea of success, and continue to think about grit and perseverance and how it is showing itself in your own life and in your own career, I think that'll help you make wise career decisions. So again, this is a great article. I just tried to give you some highlights here from Angela Duckworth and her researchers at the University of Pennsylvania. So I'll put the link for the article in the show notes in our application guide, so you can make sure that you get that, and you can find that over at wwpcast.com. All right, so now that we've talked through some research and story and our big idea for this episode, after our break, I will finish up this episode by bringing you through our application questions. So be sure to stick around. You're listening to the Work with Purpose podcast, and we will be right back. Hey everybody, Randy here. I'm taking a short break from this episode to give you an opportunity to check out a specific resource that I made just for you, all to help you understand your unique work values and to help you take an intentional step on your career journey. It's called the Occupation Card Sort, and it's a 16-minute career tutorial video that I made just for you. I think you'll find it useful, and it'll help you apply everything that you're learning about in this episode of the podcast. This tutorial covers the 6 major work values, and it'll help you get clear about what's important to you as you consider the company you work for, a new job, and different things like that. Now, I'm selling this tutorial video for $19.99. That's a steal of a price for the value you're getting from it. You can purchase this career tutorial from my website, wwpcast.com/shop. Again, that's wwpcast.com/shop. Oh, and one more thing. Remember, every donation helps to fund future seasons of the Work with Purpose podcast. So be assured, your giving is going to a great cause. Now, let's get back to the show. All right, so welcome back to the Work with Purpose podcast. This month, we've been talking all about the value of grit and perseverance for your career journey. So really quickly, before we get into our application questions, our big idea for this month, that 1 or 2 sentence takeaway, it was this: to have a successful career journey, you'll need to embrace the idea of perseverance and grit. Also talked you through some research from Angela Duckworth, who's written a lot on grit and perseverance in education. She talked about the idea. She encouraged students in K through 12, and I think some takeaways for you and for me, to see success as something that is developed over time and not kind of a microwave approach to thinking of success, but a crockpot approach, kind of a low and slow over time, developing success, and also being okay with failure as well. So as we finish up this episode, I want to bring you next and finally to our application questions. So as we wrap up this episode, our application questions, I wanted to be kind of short and simple this month. So I just have 2 questions that I want you to think about to help you apply everything that I've been teaching you about, bringing you to in this month's episode. So you can find these application questions in our application guide. You can find it at our website, wwpcast.com. That's wwpcast.com, where you can find links to all the resources we talk about in these questions. So for this month, our first application is this: what's one part of your career that you think you need to show a bit more grit and perseverance? I'll say that one more time. What's one part of your career you think you need to show more perseverance and grit? So I wanted you to think in this question, to really get honest with yourself and think about, how have things been going in your career? What parts of your career can you improve in? So an example could be, if you're in a job right now that you really don't like, with a supervisor that you don't like, maybe a place where you can do some more grit and perseverance is you might research how to have better and more healthier conversations with a toxic boss, or with a boss that you may not agree with. Because the truth of it is, as you're on your career journey, you can't control the choices and responses of anyone else. You can only control the choices and responses of you. So you taking some time to research some ways you can have a healthy conversation with your boss might be very helpful to you in the long term as you kind of continue in your job. And then our second and last question for this month is this: what are 1 to 2 practical ways you'll act on the item you mentioned in question 1? So in the first application question, you're thinking about what ways can you show more grit and perseverance in your career. I encourage you to get specific with that. And then number 2, we're trying to get practical on what are some ways you're going to act on that, whether you're going to read a certain book on conversations with your boss, or you're going to research for an online resources about negotiating your salary, or something like that. The results could be endless depending on your situation. All right, so that wraps up our episode for this month on grit and perseverance. I want to say thank you so much for listening to our episode. I always love putting these together and bringing them to you as our listener to help serve you and help you on your career journey. So until our next episode, remember, my name is Randy Mahoney Jr. This is the Work with Purpose podcast. And remember, you are made with purpose, so work with purpose. We'll see you soon. Hey, thanks so much for checking out the Work with Purpose podcast here on YouTube. If you found this episode helpful, if it encouraged you, please click the like button, the subscribe button, and hit the bell icon here on YouTube so that you can stay in the know when we update new episodes and that you don't miss a thing. Also, be sure to check out our website at wwpcast.com. That's kind of our home base for everything. So until next time, I'm Randy Mahoney Jr. telling you to work with purpose.